money, but any time we went anywhere, my dad would find some sort of strange instrument and bring it home with him. Like, one time I saw in the newspaper an advert and it said mandolin for sale, £40. And he had to go down to the business area of Liverpool to get it, and he went. And he met this man on his lunch break, and he handed over the £40. And he handed over this mandolin, and it was wrapped in stripy pyjamas. Another time, we'd just been doing all the food shopping, and we were on the bus back up to our house, and he looked out the window and he saw a harmonium outside a charity shop. So he whisked us all home, dumped us in the house, dumped the shopping, got on his bike, rode back into Liverpool, bought this giant harmonium. Then, of course, you can't fit a harmonium on your back when you're on a bike. So he had to go all the way back up the hill with one hand on his bike, pushing this rickety harmonium. Now, third time, we were going down Bald Street, if you know Liverpool, and we heard this sort of churning noise, and we couldn't decide if it was a machine, instrument, or a cat. And as we got closer, it got louder, and we turned the corner, and we saw this busker, and this is what it played. Is a village in Nottinghamshire, and in Gotham there's a giant factory, and in the factory they make cheese, and they make it in big round moon shapes, and they cut it into little triangles to sell. Now one evening the dairymaid was on her way home, and it was quite late and it was dark, and she had to go past the pond, and on her way past she looked and she noticed that one of the cheeses had fallen in. Now she was responsible for the cheeses, she was the one that put them up on the shelves, and she thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in so much trouble if anyone finds out about this. And she stood there wondering what to do, and she thought, I know, I'll get the caretaker. So she went out the park and to the caretaker's house. And she knocked on the door, and it was pretty late, so it took him a while to come out, but eventually he opened the door. And he had his slippers on, his dressing gown. He says, what do you want? She says, I'm so sorry, but one of the cheeses has fallen in the pond. I'm going to be in so much trouble. Can you help me? And he thinks about it, and he says, well, I'll get a stick. We'll see if we can fish it out. So the dairymaid and the caretaker go back down to the pond, and they fish about with the stick, but the cheese has gone further in. And the caretaker says, oh my gosh, you know, this is my fault. I probably didn't lock the door at the end of the day. I tell you what, we'll get the park keeper. He'll know what to do. So they go out the park and over to the park keeper's house, and they knock on the door, and it's later now, and they knock again. Eventually a window opens, and the park keeper looks out with his nightcap on. And he says, what do you want? And the caretaker looks up and says, I'm really sorry, but one of the cheeses has fallen in the pond. If we don't get it out, I'm going to be in so much trouble. Can you help me? And he says, well, I've got a fishing net. So he comes back down and comes out the door with a fishing net, like the ones you use for tadpoles when you're little. And they go, the dairymaid and the caretaker and the park keeper go back down to the pond. And they have a fish about, but by now the cheese has gone even further into the water. And the park keeper says, oh, you know, this is all my fault. I've been meaning to build a fence around that pond for years. I knew someone was going to fall in. I tell you what, we'll get the farmer. He knows everything about cheese. So they all made their way up to the top of the hill where the farmer lived. And they knocked on the door. By now, it was getting early morning. And the farmer came out quite quickly because he was on his way to milk the cows. And the park keeper says, I'm really sorry, but one of the cheeses has fallen in the pond. If we don't get it out, I'm going to be in so much trouble. Can you help me? And the farmer thinks about it and he says, okay, I'll get me cows. So he leads them up to the cow field and gets a prize cow, and the dairymaid and the caretaker and the park keeper and the farmer and his cow make their way down to the pond. And when they get there, the farmer says to his cow, cow, drink. So he nuzzles down in the water and she takes a big slurp. But there's still lots of water in the pond, so she takes another big slurp. And another big slurp. And she carries on until she's really, really quite full. But she looks in the water and it's not green at all. Now, as they've been slurping, the sun started to rise. And as the sun started to rise, the moon has started to go down. And as the moon has started to go down, the cheese has gone further and further to the other side of the pond. And when it's got to the other side, it's rolled out and rolls up the hill. And all the people watch as the cheese drops over the horizon, just where the moon was going down. And they all look at each other, and the dairymaid says, "You know, if we don't tell anyone, we can keep this our secret and we won't get in trouble." And so, the farmer and his cow, and the park-keeper, and the caretaker, and the dairymaid all make their own way home. Now, as the busker finished his story, my dad pleaded and pleaded for him to part with his hurdy-gurdy, but he was having none of it. But as we left, I knew that it wouldn't just be my dad coming home